Those who served know that war leaves more than scars. It leaves unanswered questions, files that disappear, memories no one believes. Here, the veterans speak, and for the first time, you'll hear what really happened. Welcome to War Veterans Stories. Those who served know that war leaves more than scars. It leaves unanswered questions, files that disappear, memories no one believes. Here, the veterans speak, and for the first time, they're the ones telling it. Welcome to War Veterans Stories. This is Case File 011. My name is Miles Hartwell. I spent 11 years as a combat medic, and after I got out, I started collecting stories other veterans didn't know what to do with. The ones that never fit into a VA intake form. The ones you don't put in a journal because you don't want proof of your own handwriting saying it happened. This file holds 3 of them. 3 different men, 3 different armies, 3 different provinces, recorded between 2018 and 2022, with their permission. Names changed at their request. None of them knew each other when they told me these. None of them had ever met. And when I finally sat all 3 accounts side by side, I understood why each man had spent years assuming he was the only one. 2 of the 3 are still alive. One of them stopped answering my calls 18 months ago, and nobody in his family will tell me why. To understand these 3 accounts, you have to understand the ground they happened on. Because in this war, the terrain shaped almost everything, including what men swore they saw in it. The first account takes place in Kandahar province, in the winter rotation of 2008, along the Arghandab River, a district that, by the mid-2000s, had become one of the most contested pieces of ground in southern Afghanistan, a fertile river valley of orchards and irrigation canals that gave insurgents cover right up to the edge of Kandahar city itself. Canadian forces, operating under Regional Command South, ran mounted patrols through that valley for years, in light armored vehicles built to survive exactly the kind of threat the terrain was known for. The second account takes place in Kunar province, in the winter of 2010 into 2011, a region defined by some of the steepest, most isolated terrain in the entire country, where American infantry held remote outposts along valleys so narrow the sun would disappear behind the ridgelines hours before actual sunset. Kunar, and the valleys running off it, had by that point already earned a reputation among American forces for some of the heaviest sustained fighting of the entire campaign. The third account takes place in Helmand province in October of 2011, at the height of the Marine Corps' presence in the south, a province that, for the better part of a decade, saw more American and coalition casualties than almost anywhere else in the country. Its bases built alongside Afghan National Army compounds as part of the broader effort to transition security responsibility to Afghan forces. 3 provinces, 3 different branches of 3 different militaries. 3 years, 3 separate deployments, with no overlap in command structure, no shared personnel, and, as far as any record shows, no contact between the men involved, before or after. I didn't set out to connect these 3 cases. They came to me years apart, through different channels, told to me by men who had no reason to know the other 2 existed. It was only after I'd transcribed all 3 that I noticed something none of them could have noticed on their own. A pattern of behavior, repeating across a distance of hundreds of miles and several years, in a phenomenon none of them ever agreed on a name for. I'm going to give you the first account in full, exactly the way it was told to me. Then I'll bring in the other 2, no less detailed, no less specific, and let you decide for yourself whether 3 men in 3 provinces, describing separate nights years apart, were ever really describing 3 different things. Kandahar province, late 2008. The man who told me this asked me to call him Marchetti, Canadian Army, mechanized infantry, attached to a task force running mounted sweeps through orchard villages during the winter rotation of 2008. His unit rolled with Lev 3s and a pair of Leopard tanks, engineers and support vehicles trailing the column, on a routine 4-day sweep of settlements along the Arghandab River, southwest of Kandahar city. The riverbed runs completely dry that time of year, he told me, half a kilometer wide, flat as a parking lot. You park in the middle of it at night, and nothing can get close without you seeing it coming across open ground for 200 meters in any direction. That was the whole point of doing it that way. It was supposed to be the safest place we could sleep. They harbored in a wide ring the first night, vehicles facing outward, rotating watch through till dawn, everyone else grabbing whatever sleep the schedule allowed. Marchetti was in the back of his Lav with the gunner, a friend he called Callahan, both of them lying on the troop benches, while their driver, a quiet guy named Whitlock, watched a movie up front in his hatch. Marchetti and Callahan were supposed to take second watch, so they stayed awake, reading and half dozing, waiting for their shift. About 30 minutes before we were supposed to go on watch, we both heard it at the same time. Someone climbing up onto the hull. You know that sound. It's a heavy vehicle, but a body landing on the top of it makes a very specific noise, and there's no mistaking it for anything else. We figured it was someone coming to roust us early, some sergeant wanting us up ahead of schedule. We sat up. We looked at each other. We waited for a hatch to pop. Nothing happened. It just went quiet. Not quiet like someone climbed back down. Quiet like it had never happened. I know what I heard. Callahan knows what he heard. Nobody climbed down off that vehicle. So I got up, popped the hatch over the bench, stuck my head out. Nobody on top. I climbed all the way out, got up on the turret to check toward the driver's hatch, in case whoever it was had gone up there to bother Whitlock instead. Nobody there either. And here's the thing, from up on that turret, in the middle of a dry riverbed at night, I could see everything. Every flanking vehicle, every man on watch, the whole open ground in every direction. There was nobody moving anywhere, not a person, not an animal, nothing. He climbed back in, told Callahan and Whitlock to lock every hatch from the inside, and the three of them sat in silence until their watch started. Nothing else happened that night. But the next morning, once the column was moving and things had quieted down on the radio, Whitlock came on the intercom and told them something that Marchetti says changed the entire tone of the deployment for the rest of that tour. He said that sometime in the night he couldn't sleep, so he was watching something on his laptop in the driver's hatch. Zoning out, the way you do at 2 in the morning on watch when nothing's happening. And he said he felt a hand settle on the back of his head. Not grab him, settle, gentle. And then the fingers moved forward, through his hair. Slow, like somebody grooming a kid before school. He said it felt deliberate, not rushed, not aggressive. Like whoever was doing it had all the time in the world. He spun around expecting one of us had crawled up to mess with him. There was nobody there. Nobody could have gotten there without him hearing it, and there was nowhere to hide on that hull anyway. Marchetti and Callahan didn't believe him at first. They thought he was riding the same wave of adrenaline from the climbing incident and trying to one-up it. It took most of that day for them to understand he wasn't exaggerating anything. He was scared in a way I'd never seen him scared. Whitlock was the calmest guy in our platoon. Nothing rattled him, and this had rattled him down to the bone. In the days that followed, the three of them talked quietly about whether to look into who had used that specific Alav before them. These vehicles don't rotate out of country. They get handed from outgoing crews to incoming crews for the entire length of the occupation, sometimes for years, sometimes across multiple units. Somebody could have died in that exact hull. Somebody could have been medevaced out of that exact bench seat. There was no way to know without pulling maintenance records nobody had access to. We talked about looking into it, Marchetti said, and then we decided we really didn't want to know the answer. Some things you leave alone because knowing doesn't help you, It just gives the fear a shape. Nothing else happened for the rest of that deployment, in that vehicle or anywhere else in the company, as far as Marchetti ever heard. He came home, finished his contract, got out 4 years later. He told me the story sitting in his kitchen with his hands wrapped around a coffee mug he never drank from, and at the end of it, he said something I've thought about a lot since. I don't think it wanted to hurt him. That's the part that still gets me. Whatever climbed onto that vehicle that night, it didn't come to hurt Whitlock. It came to touch him. And I don't know what's worse, something that wants you dead, or something that just wants to know you're there. Marchetti's account sat in my files for almost 2 years before the next one landed in my inbox. A different war, a different country of origin, a different terrain entirely. But the shape of it was close enough that I read it twice before I let myself believe what I was reading. Kunar Province, winter 2010 into 2011. The second man asked to be called Okafor, American infantry, deployed to Kunar Province, a region defined by narrow valleys and steep rock walls, where the sun disappears behind the ridgeline hours before actual sunset. He was on an observation post rotation with 2 other soldiers, watching a stretch of road running below their outpost. Standard nighttime surveillance. Nothing unusual about the assignment itself. There's a road that runs along the base of the valley, he told me. We watched it every night through our night vision. You get to know every rock, every bend, every shape that road throws at you after enough nights. So when something new shows up, you notice immediately. There's a road that runs along the base of the valley, he told me. We watched it every night through our night vision. You get to know every rock, every bend, every shape that road throws at you after enough nights. So when something new shows up, you notice immediately. One night, all 3 of them watched a boy, Okafor guessed maybe 12, 13 years old, walking 4 goats up that road. Nothing alarming about it on its face. Local shepherds moved animals through that valley constantly, day or night, and the goats themselves were clearly visible even without the goggles, their silhouettes moving steadily along the road in the dark. We watched him for a while. No big deal, just a kid with his goats, probably heading to a family compound further up the valley. Then I took my goggles off for a second, just to rest my eyes. That's it. Routine thing you do on a long shift. And when I looked with my bare eyes, there were no goats. Nothing. Just an empty road. He put the goggles back on. Goats were right there, same spot, moving the same direction. But the kid? No kid. Just the goats walking themselves up the road, like nothing was leading them. I told the other 2 guys to check for themselves. Same thing. With the goggles, you could see him clear as day, walking those 4 animals up that road like it was any other night. Take the goggles off, and there was no person there at all. Just goats, walking a straight line up an empty road, like they were following something none of us could see without help. They watched it for over 20 minutes before whatever it was disappeared from view around a bend further up the valley. We reported it. Command brushed it off, obviously. What are you supposed to do with a report like that? But it got around. Word travels in a company faster than any official channel, and it went all the way up to our sergeant major eventually. A week later, all 3 of us got pulled for a random urinalysis. Coincidence, they said. I believe in coincidences about as much as I believe in a lot of things now, which isn't very much. None of them tested positive for anything. Okafor told me that was almost worse. It meant there was no easy explanation left on the table. He mentioned something else, almost as an afterthought, near the end of our conversation. Other soldiers in that same valley had reported hearing whispering, carried on the wind through the rock walls at night. Not wind noise that merely resembled voices, but something closer to actual words, just below the threshold of understanding. Okafor told me he never personally heard it, but after the night with the shepherd, He said he stopped being so sure those other reports were just wind. I've been shot at. I've had guys next to me get hit. None of that messes with your head the way 20 minutes of watching a kid who isn't there does. You can rationalize combat. There's a logic to it, even when it's horrible. There was no logic to that road. Helmand Province, October 2011. The third man is the one who stopped returning my calls. I'll call him Sadler. His own request from years ago, one I'm still honoring. He was a Marine on perimeter defense at a base I won't name specifically, positioned along a wall shared with an Afghan National Army compound. 2 months before Sadler arrived at that post, an ANA pickup truck lost control on the access road and crashed directly into the HESCO barrier wall at a guard position the unit called Post Hotel. The guard towers were named using the phonetic alphabet straight down the perimeter. Alpha, through however far the wall ran. Both soldiers inside the truck died on impact. The wall was torn open at that spot and never properly repaired, just patched enough to hold, left standing with visible damage for the rest of the deployment. I'd heard stories before I ever stood a shift up there, Sadler told me. Guys talking about footsteps on the metal stairwell with nobody on it. Shadows crossing the doorway when nobody was near the door. I didn't think much of it. You hear stories on every post and every war zone. I was more worried about actual contact than ghost stories. His first night on Post Hotel, standing watch with a partner he doesn't remember clearly anymore, he looked toward the damaged section of the wall and saw 2 shadows standing side by side, roughly the size and shape of 2 grown men. My first thought was, it's just shadows being cast off the ANA gate lights. They had floodlights maybe 200 meters back. But the angle was wrong for that. If it was cast from that far away, the shadows should have been huge, stretched out, blurry at the edges. These were sharp, defined, the right size for a person standing right there. And they weren't moving at all, not swaying, not shifting weight. Completely still. He called his partner over. His partner saw the same thing and agreed it looked wrong. Assuming a possible security threat, Sadler scanned the area with his rifle-mounted flashlight, and his partner shined a beam directly onto the shadows themselves. They didn't disappear. That's the part that still gets me telling it now. You shine a light on a shadow, it goes away. That's how shadows work. That's physics. These didn't go anywhere. They just sat there in the light, still shaped like 2 people, still completely still. His partner cleared the ground below the tower and found nothing. They tried to write it off as tired eyes playing tricks. A few minutes later, the shadows reappeared, drifting sideways, not walking, gliding, smooth and level, into a larger shadow cast by parked ANA vehicles nearby and vanished into it. Sadler mentioned it over the side radio channel to the other posts. One of the other Marines asked him, in a voice that had gone suddenly serious, exactly what time it had happened. Sadler checked his watch when he answered. 3:15 in the morning. I've always believed in that stuff, ghosts, the paranormal, whatever you want to call it. So part of me was terrified, and part of me was almost excited, if that makes any sense. My partner and I watched those shadows come and go a few more times until about 4. We decided between us it had to be the 2 ANA soldiers who died there. The following night, Sadler convinced a friend from a different post, he referred to him only as Priest, to switch shifts and come see it himself, since Priest hadn't believed the story. At 3 that morning, the same shadows appeared and drifted into the larger shadow exactly as before. Priest found it strange, but not especially compelling, and decided to lie down and rest while Sadler kept watch. A few minutes after he laid down, we heard this loud bang, like someone hit one of the metal support beams under the post with a pipe. We both went to full alert. Priest grabbed his rifle, went down to check, came back up and said there was nothing there. We figured maybe the tower was just settling, something metal contracting in the cold. He laid back down, The exact same bang happened again a minute later. They mentioned it over the radio, and the noise had by then alarmed enough of the other posts that a corporal was sent up with fresh batteries as an excuse to check on them. Priest watched him climb the stairs, and, as the corporal reached the top, asked whether the sergeant had come up with him too. The corporal said he'd come alone. Priest's face just drained, Sadler told me. He said he'd watched someone walking up the stairs directly behind the corporal, close enough to be following him step for step. After that, Priest believed every word we'd told him. He'd seen something himself that he couldn't explain away. Sadler refused to stand watch on Post Hotel again after that, and was reassigned back to his previous position. He said he never personally witnessed anything else. But the stories from that base didn't stop. A Marine he stayed close friends with afterward, on a different post, reported watching a dust cloud kicked up under a fence line one night, initially assuming it was one of the jackals that scavenged near the base after dark. Instead, the dust rolled down the berm, grew larger, and slowly took the shape of a walking person, legs moving, arms swinging, before dissipating completely, partway across the road. Other incidents followed with no pattern and no explanation, banging on the portable toilets in the middle of the night, mounted machine guns pivoting slowly on their stands with nobody touching them. We used to talk about it like it made sense in a horrible kind of way, Sadler said. That country's been a battlefield for thousands of years. Alexander the Great, the Soviets, us. So much death soaked into that ground. It didn't feel like a stretch to think something of all that was still wandering out there with nowhere left to go. He told me he'd spoken to Afghan interpreters attached to his unit, who described hearing screaming and fighting some nights along old battlefields from the Soviet War, more than 3 decades after those battles had ended. One interpreter told him about a family friend who died fighting the Soviets and who was reportedly seen, after his death, walking home through Kabul one evening and kissing his own daughter on the forehead before disappearing. That interpreter wasn't a superstitious guy. He was one of the most level-headed people I worked with over there. He believed what he told me completely. Sadler told me the last part of his account almost reluctantly, near the very end of our conversation, years after everything else had happened. After he came home, he said, he began finding his wife's shoes arranged in a crossed pattern directly under their bedroom doorframe. Mornings when neither of them remembered putting them there. It happened enough times over a few weeks that he stopped assuming it was the dogs. I never felt completely alone in that house, not in a comforting way. Something with me, behind me, in every dark room. I started turning lights on before I walked into any space. For years, I couldn't be awake between 3 and 4 in the morning without my whole body going rigid, just waiting. He told me that eventually it faded. He left active duty, became a police officer, told me that nothing in his new career, not one call, not one scene, had ever frightened him the way those nights on Post Hotel had. That was the last time I spoke to him at length. He answered a few short messages after that. Then, about 18 months ago, he stopped responding entirely. I reached out to a mutual contact who told me only that Sadler had gone quiet and that his family preferred not to discuss it further. I don't know what that means. I've chosen not to guess. 3 men, 3 provinces, 3 armies that don't share intelligence, personnel, or equipment, deployed years apart, none of them aware the others existed until I put their accounts side by side. A hand that touches instead of harms. A shepherd who only exists through a lens. Shadows that refuse the one rule shadows are supposed to obey. None of them agree on what it was. None of them were ever given the chance to find out. I'm not going to pretend I know either. And if anyone tells you they have the full answer to any of these 3 accounts, I'd be careful trusting them. I don't know what connects a dry riverbed in Kandahar to a mountain road in Kunar, to a broken wall in Helmand. 3 different years, 3 different corners of the same war. Maybe nothing connects them at all, And that's just the shape fear takes in a country that's swallowed so many soldiers. It doesn't know how to let any of them go clean. Or maybe it's something else. I keep the file open either way. There are many more stories where these came from. If this is your first time here, welcome. And if you've been here since the beginning, thank you. This channel is just getting started, and every like, comment, and subscription means more than you know. I'll see you in the next one.